All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Consistency Corner podcast. Today, we are going to be chatting about entrepreneurship and redefining mental wellness through neuroregulation, which, if you're new to that word, you might be like, oh my gosh, what are we talking about? But don't worry, we're going to break it down so that it makes sense and talk about why neuroregulation is important to understand when it comes to mindset work. And if you haven't listened to the show a lot, you probably don't know that while I'm not a mindset coach, I'm a big proponent of business owners making sure that they are working on their mindset, because I do believe that any marketing strategy has to be fueled by a growth mindset. And I've learned in my own journey in the personal development space and through personal development and healing that sometimes mindset work is more work than we realize, because there's some neuroregulation that needs to happen. And so I'm excited for our guest today, Margy Feldhuhn, who is going to chat with us about this. And Margy and I connected on Instagram. I actually had heard her on a friend's podcast. My coach, Holly Marie Haynes, she was a guest on Holly's podcast. So I started following her and was just, kind of learning from her. And she started talking about neuroregulation and neuro drills. And I was like, what are you talking about? What is this? We need to have this conversation. And so I'm excited to have her here today. And she is a podcast host as well and multimillion-dollar serial entrepreneur. And she's the co-owner and CEO of Interview Connections, the first and leading podcast booking agency. But she's got a range of other businesses that she is involved in. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today and get into the conversation on neuroregulation. But Margy, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your entrepreneurial journey and how this led you down this path of neuroregulation and why this is something that you've kind of become a thought leader in this space on?
Yeah, I kind of can't believe that I'm in this space now. Like, life is so interesting, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, like doing what they're doing now, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, would not have thought they would be. So I started out my entrepreneurial journey. I actually I worked as a contractor, a $15 an hour part-time contractor for Interview Connections, which is a company that was founded by at that time, like a former coworker of mine. And I wanted to work remotely, and she had started this business, and I knew nothing about online business, but I was like, oh, you can work from home? Like, that's real? Wow. Like, that blew my mind. And so I started as a contractor in 2016, and I was booking my list of clients as guests on podcasts, and I was listening to their podcast interviews to get to know them better and to learn more, and Googling everything like, what is B2B? What is SEO? Like, I knew absolutely nothing. And I really fell in love with business. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is cool. Like, not only can these people work from home, but like they're doing all this cool stuff. And I had such a range of clients in different types of industries. So it was like, wow, there's like a lot of different ways to be a business owner and to be successful. And so I continued to grow with Interview Connections. I became the first employee, W-2 employee in 2017, and then became CEO and 50% owner at the start of 2018. So that was the start of my business journey. And that was, having an agency is a very interesting experience. Every time I hear a story of anyone who like started with an agency, I'm like, yep. Like, it's intense in some ways, because there's such a heavy team aspect. When it's done for you, you need a big team. As you grow, the team has to grow. And so you very quickly need to get very, very good at organizational leadership and team. And I had really been a manager in other roles, but that's very different than having
Mhm.
your own team, especially in a brand new industry. So like, no one's coming in knowing how to book people on podcasts. We're bringing in people, we're figuring out who to hire. So it was quite a crash course. And then ended up, I think it was 2020, had a client. I'm still learning so much from our Interview Connections client. We had a client named Elizabeth Kristoff who did applied neurology.
Mhm.
And I had no idea what it was, but my business partner, Jess, was like, this is so great. Like, I've been doing these videos with her. I'm doing neuro drills. And I was like, what are you talking about? But it was so cool. So she got me into it, and we started doing it. And neuro drills, like for anyone who doesn't know, there's hundreds of them, and they're different. They stimulate different parts of your brain. So you're working with different nerves, and it can be anything from like breathing into a plastic bag to like tapping or like different types of it feels like witchcraft because you'll do an assessment. So for me, I always assess by moving my neck mobility. I get really tight in my neck. So that's like where I can see the difference. And so I'll test my neck mobility and it'll be really stiff. And then I'll do a neuro drill, like I'll tap something or like, and suddenly my neck is totally loose. And I like just that alone, that almost party trick aspect of it. When I first did it, I was like, okay, tell me more. Like
Mm-hmm.
I need more because I had done a lot of mindset and I love mindset and I'm a big believer in mindset and energy, but I wasn't working with my body. So when my body was in a stress response, I could affirm all I wanted, like nothing was going to change. And so it evolved from, wow, this is such a cool like party trick. I can just like feel totally relaxed and totally change the state of my body to seeing the compounded results over time in how I dealt with situations in little things. Like I stopped getting eye twitches, which
Mm-hmm.
anyone who has a big team probably also get eye twitches. Just like all these little things, and then these really big ways, like the way that I interacted with my wife. Like I would find that I was so much less reactive, and the way that it impacted me as a leader in interview connections in my business, I was like, wow, like everyone should be doing this basically.
Yeah. I remember in 2020 starting to hear the terms dysregulated or regulated nervous system and being like, what are we talking about? And then realizing that, like, as a collective, we were going through this incredible stress response and learning what it meant to like finish the stress cycle. And how if we didn't do that, it could impact our healing. And so that, like, people would say, "Oh, do cold plunges." And then I remember people being like, "No, no, no, if you do a cold plunge and you're in a dysregulated state, like it can actually do more harm than good." And so for somebody who's like kind of new to this, could you give us like a first grader explanation of what does it mean to be dysregulated or what actually is nervous system regulation?
Yes. So when people are talking about nervous system dysregulation, it's going into a threat response. So you might hear people call it like fight or flight. You might hear it called a trauma response. Your body tenses up, and there's a lot of different types. Like you could go into a threat response and you're in a fight response and you're in a fight and you don't even know why. You could freeze. Flop is like I've gone into flop on like really technical, really long Zoom calls when I'm like clearly like I should have like tapped out before, and I'm just like leaning on my hand. It's like your body suddenly feels so heavy or you're like stuck to the couch. And so there's a lot of things that can indicate being dysregulated. And like what you're talking about around cold plunges and around all these trends is that it's important that you test and retest. And this is something that I learned from Elizabeth. And now we are business partners. And that's a big thing that we talk about in our membership because people are individual. So when you do a test, like for example, testing your neck mobility, and then you do something like a cold plunge or like a neuro drill, and then you test again, if your tightness got worse, that was negative for you. And so
Mhm.
a lot of things you can train, so you can do positive drills and practice them, and that can be really powerful. But the reason that you have people saying you got to do a cold plunge is that for them it works really well, and then you have people saying no, don't do it, because for them it doesn't work well, because we all have very unique nervous systems. And so a big part of it is really getting to know your own body and your own nervous system.
Yeah, and similar to like a marketing strategy. Like
Yeah.
there's not a right or wrong way to market your business. There's what's right for you and your own nervous system, and I would imagine your own like history impacts the, things that you've held on to and the things that you've stored and what you've dealt with or haven't dealt with in the past can definitely impact all those things, which is going to be completely unique compared to anybody else, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think especially online when everything is just like a little soundbite or a quick video, you can lose some of that nuance about everybody is really different. And it's important to, when you're messing with your nervous system and doing stuff like that, it's important to be really gentle. It's important to get guidance and not wing it, because especially if you have a lot of trauma or something like that, it can have, negative effects.
Yeah. So how is neuroregulation different from therapy?
That's a great question. I have done both. I will never say like do this instead of therapy about anything, because I think that's a really dangerous ground to get on. I think it really comes to like knowing yourself and knowing what you need and the season that you're at. I've done a lot of types of therapy. I've done talk therapy, which I found really for me had a ceiling in how helpful it was, because
Mm.
talking about your problems over and over again, while initially it can really be helpful to have a compassionate person witness and validate your experience, I found that you can only really do that for so long. It's like, okay, I've hit a ceiling though on how much I'm improving by doing this. It's great to be validated, but I'm talking about the same stuff all the time, which
Mhm.
doesn't really feel productive. And then I've done EMDR therapy, which I really liked more than talk therapy. And EMDR, it's bilateral brain stimulation. And so you can do that with tapping on alternate sides or looking side to side, which is funny because essentially EMDR is just a single neuro drill.
Mhm.
So it was really nice for me. And also I kind of hit a ceiling with that. And so when I learned about neuro drills, I was like, oh, this is amazing, because it's like EMDR plus hundreds of other things that you can test and progress as you get better at them. You can make them more challenging. You can stand on one leg. You can do multiple at the same time and stack them to train your nervous system. And so getting beyond just getting regulated to now I'm training my nervous system. So I'm expanding my capacity to deal with things, and I'm training my vision. So I have slight deficits in my right eye that I'm training, because I know that when my brain is like, okay, our vision is awesome, it's less stressed because it's like my information is good. When I'm mapping my body, doing proprioceptive work, when my brain is like, okay, I know where every piece is of the body, it's accounted for, that lowers my stress too. And so it's been really fun to experiment and learn more about it.
Yeah. So talking about that, like increasing your capacity and understanding the stress response. Like I think as business owners, we all know the stress is never going to go away. Like that's not realistic. That's not something that's going to happen whether you're a business owner or not. There's going to be stressful situations in life. But as a business owner, I think, and I've had this conversation with some people in my community recently, that it can feel like so much to deal with the regular life things while also trying to run a business. And it just feels so heavy sometimes. Talk to me a little bit about how like doing neuroregulation and training your nervous system in this way can help you manage the regular life things that come up that feels like so much.
Yeah, it's a big part of it for me. And it's almost like nervous system hygiene. Like every day I log in to the Brainbase site and I do a video. So whether it's like a 15-minute one or a 30-minute one, every single day I'm training my nervous system. I also meditate every day. So it's just like one of those built-in things that I do every day, because it does make it so much easier to deal with what comes up. Because as a business owner, you have just a constant low grade stress of like being responsible for a lot of stuff and a lot of people, a lot of clients, a team. And then also stuff pops up unexpectedly, right? So you have to have extra bandwidth. If you're at capacity, just paying your taxes and doing the basic things you have to do, and then suddenly there's like a fire to put out that you weren't expecting, it's really helpful to be training your nervous system so that you're able to stay present and have the tools to approach things effectively. And I also find the language really helpful, because it sort of takes the blame out of it, self blame or other blame, instead of being like, this person's crazy, or like, I acted so terribly, or I can't believe I, yelled at my partner or whatever it is. It's like seeing like, oh, I got dysregulated, they got dysregulated, and you still take responsibility, but I find it very empowering to look at the nervous system and see how practical it is and how practical these outputs are when this pressure builds up and the nervous system knows it needs to discharge stress for the health of the organism. It's like, all right, well, then you're going to binge eat, or you're going to yell at somebody, or you're going to drink alcohol, or you can have these healthy coping mechanisms that you do every day so that you don't have those outputs that you don't want.
Yeah. And I can imagine, like, we all understand with our immune system, like, we need to get enough sleep, we need to eat healthy food, we need to get sunlight, we need to move our bodies. And your nervous system is another system that needs, to your point, hygiene. And I think that was a really great way to put it, in that, like, we can't just eat one salad and have enough nutrients forever. We can't just take one shower and be clean forever. So this becomes something that we need to do on a regular basis for that kind of mental hygiene. Can you talk about when you started doing neuroregulation drills, how you created this as a habit when you probably already had a very busy schedule?
Yes. A big part of it was like it being able to be fast. Like the reason we have 15-minute videos on the brainbase.com site now is because I was like, I need shorter ones. And so logging onto the site really, and this is not just a shameless plug for this business that I now co-own, but logging onto the site has been very helpful for me. Because it gives me new drills every day. And some of them are repeats that I've done a lot. And so I can progress them. Some of them are new. I think about what systems I'm training. So it's like, okay, I make sure I do vision once a week. I make sure I do emotional release at least once a week, which is one of the ones I always put off. But it really, like, doing it at least once a week really helps. And so that's how I do it. And it's nice. There's live classes. I always go to for the replays because I do have kind of a crazy schedule, and it's easier to just do it on demand for me. But that's how I stay accountable. And it's just part of my routine that I look forward to. Like I come up into my office on my computer, I do a 15 to 30-minute video. I'll usually do like my meditation after that. And then I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the day, go work out and work. So that's how I do it.
Yeah. And I can imagine, like, working out, it's one of those things that feels like it's going to take up time. And it does take up time, but it gives you increased capacity. It gives you a more focused energy. It gives you better output with the time that you do have then throughout the day.
Yes, because you definitely spend less time like cleaning up messes of like, oh, I avoided this situation and it got really big because I was too dysregulated to face it. Or I started a fight and now I have to fix it. Or I'm dysregulated and I need to dissociate. And so I've been scrolling on my phone for 2.5 hours, like after work, like it's just, yeah, there's so many outputs that you don't even think of as outputs of the nervous system until you start getting into it, that eat up so much time that I do find it really is powerful and it really is helpful. And I think also, like, for people like you and for entrepreneurs who are getting visible and for our clients who we're booking on podcasts, that can be so dysregulating. Like, even if people aren't conscious of it, because they're like, well, it's not like I'm going on Oprah, like I'm going on a podcast, it should be fine. More people get dysregulated by that than they think. And so when you're in a place in your business where you're getting more visible and you're getting out there more, regulating your nervous system, even if you think you don't need it, can be really, really helpful, because we have clients who, they're getting out there and then they find themselves like overeating after their interview or wanting a drink or any type of output, and they're not even conscious that it's causing stress. Like, being visible can feel scary. And so it's a really great thing to regulate around so that you can be fully self-expressed and put yourself out there and have an impact.
Yes, I can totally relate to that. I mean, I know oftentimes after podcast interviews, even though I love the conversations and I love doing them, I finish an interview and what do I want to do? I immediately want to pick up my phone and scroll.
Yeah.
And it's like you want that disconnect, that zone out. And it's because there has just been a big energy output, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with, like, everything is an output. Like, dissociating on your phone for a little bit is okay. And I think when people have like a very strict approach, it like you have to live your life. It's when you get to a point of like, I think this is getting dysfunctional. Like, I'm doing
Mm.
this more than I want to be. Or like, I want to get out there more, but I'm scared. So I'm not doing it. I'm stuck. I'm frozen. And so it's when it's impacting your life and it's impacting what you want to do that I think it's really good to work through. I mean, having outputs of like, oh, I overate or I had an extra glass of wine in and of itself, like not a huge deal. It's when it
Mhm.
gets to the point where you're feeling like not good, that I think it's really helpful to look at what are some other ways that I can lower my stress, that I can regulate my nervous system so that I'm not experiencing insomnia or other outputs that are negatively impacting my life.
Yeah. And I think understanding your own patterns in terms of, you talked about the stress response of flight, fight, or freeze. I think freeze is only recently been talked about. I think there for a long time, it was very much like, oh, fight or flight, fight or flight. And I was like never a fight or flight person. I'm a freeze person. And so then when that started to become talked about a little bit more, it was like, oh, there's not actually anything wrong with me. I'm not a bad person. I'm going through something and need to work on that to be able to get out of this response.
Yes, it's nice to see more being talked about. Like I love seeing freeze because freeze is really common. And it's nice also like flop and fawn have gotten more airtime. And I think a lot of people with people pleasing tendencies see themselves in fawn. It's like you get
Mhm.
dysregulated and then you go into wanting to appease or over giving to feel safe. And that can get really disempowering. And then flop is just like the chronic exhaustion. Like if you're a business owner who's found yourself Googling, how do I know if I have Lyme disease, which I have absolutely done multiple times because you're under so much stress and you're just so exhausted, that can be something that can really be impacted with nervous system training.
Yeah. And understanding that exhaustion, that you can heal from it if you're willing to do the work. But like just Googling it is not going to fix the problems.
Yes. Yeah. And seeing exhaustion and dissociation and pain as outputs of the nervous system and remembering that your nervous system loves you and wants to protect you. Like
Mm.
it's not a fight. Like if your nervous system is like night night, like give you, it's because it knows you need rest. If it's causing pain like migraines, it's because it's like, okay, let's go in a dark room and lie down right now. That's what you need. And so remembering that these are adaptive outputs that are there to protect you can
Mhm.
help so that it's not this adversarial relationship, but it's like, how can I work with my nervous system to give it what it wants so that it doesn't feel the need to lay me out for 3 days with a migraine because I've been overworking?
Yeah. So that question of what does my nervous system need, or what do I need right now? Do you find that that's trial and error? Does that come from like an intuitive place for you? How do you and some of your clients maybe even like know when you're not used to giving your nervous system what it needs, what to actually try?
It was definitely a journey for me. And we do not just neuro, but somatics. So like the neuro drills and the brain stuff and also the body. So moving the body, releasing from the body, whether that's crying, whether that's screaming into a pillow. For me, honestly, I was so dissociated from my body for so long that at first I really was just like doing the drills Elizabeth was telling me to do and was like, "Yep, my neck was looser." And she was like, "Okay, keep going." And so it took me time to
Hmm.
like get back in my body because for me and for a lot of people, just being in your body and embodied can be extremely threatening. So I had to do drills for a while before I could even like spend more time in my body. And then once I was able to do that, it does become more intuitive. You're like, "Oh, I can feel I'm starting to tense up in my shoulders, or I can feel my heart starting to beat faster, or my hands are clammy, or my mouth is dry." Like you start to pick up on the things that are dysregulating you and on your patterns. But for me, and I think other people are like this too, it can take just like showing up and getting started so that you can get regulated enough to even get embodied to feel
Yeah.
those cues.
Yeah, so using the tools first to kind of get the wheels turning, and then the more you practice, the more it becomes a routine and a habit you can learn that intuition and learn what your body specifically needs. But it starts with just trying some things, right?
Yes, like everything in life and business, it starts with starting.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you start figuring stuff out, and then it really starts compounding, and it's your own journey that you start kind of playing around with.
Yeah. So, in becoming a partner in this business and your current business with, allowing business owners to get visible by getting them booked on podcasts, how do you hope to use business to contribute to the greater good and break some of these stigmas around mental health?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, they are very much separate businesses, although there is some crossover. I mean, me and my business partner, we'll send each other the link to the video we did on the site each day and try this one. So with interview connections, I feel like because we're amplifying our clients' voices, I think the impact really is in working with clients who we're really aligned with and we're really proud to get them visible. And so it's really not about us, it's about amplifying these clients and making sure we're picking the clients who are yes, we stand behind them and their message 100%. With
Hmm.
brain-based wellness, it's a little bit more of a direct impact, because this is, even though it's getting trendy, it's still not very well understood. And so helping people be in charge of their own nervous systems to understand themselves and their body in a more compassionate way of there's nothing wrong with you. The things that are happening for you that you're making mean that you're weak or you're a bad person or this or that are outputs that are adaptive. It's there. Your people pleasing is there to protect you. And if you're alive, it worked. These things worked. They got you here.
Hmm.
And now adding these tools, whether it's adding them in addition to therapy, in addition to meditation or whatever else you're doing, I think it just has incredible power to transform people's lives in the way that they relate to their bodies and each other, because we co-regulate. And so when you regulate a leader, they are setting the tone for the entire company, which has such a ripple effect on the entire team, on the families of the team. I really do think it has an incredible impact.
Yeah, in conversations about healing and, as a parent, I consume a lot of information about parenting and even reparenting and understanding that we have access to information today that people didn't have access to 20 years ago, 30 years
Yeah.
ago, 50 years ago. And so I think it's incredible to be able to take these things that we're learning and understanding this information that we have access to, and we have a responsibility to work on ourselves so that we can be those better leaders for our families and our companies and the people that we get to impact and the clients that we work with. And so I so appreciate the work that you guys are doing, because I think this is just another tool in our toolbox that can help us, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Definitely.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I do have a couple questions we ask all of our guests just to get to know you a little bit better. And knowing that you have a couple of different businesses and are a serial entrepreneur, we do always ask about brand values. But I would love to know what is one of your personal values and how you landed on that and how it shows up in your work as a business owner.
I would say integrity, which is kind of a brand value buzzword. But my business partner, the year we became business partners, we did the entire landmark curriculum, and they use the word integrity a lot. And it's not like moral integrity, it's really just the power of your word, doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. Um,
Hmm.
I think that is so basic, but I think a lot of people skip that in business and they get overwhelmed and they're doing all these things. And it's just do what you said you were going to do, all the time with your team, with your clients. And I think by doing that, you build something really, really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, knowing that one of my brand values is living with a growth mindset and personal development, I always love to ask our guests, what is a favorite personal development book or podcast that you would recommend? And if you are like me and can't pick a favorite, just something that you've read or listened to recently that resonated.
My all-time favorite is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That was and I think that was a lot of people's gateway into personal development. That was my first book I read about that really resonated with me. So I think that's probably, I think he's got to stay my number one.
Yeah, I love it. Do you go back and read or listen to it when you need a boost at all?
I used to. I first read it when I was like 19, and I have gone back to it. I don't as much now. Right now, I have been doing courses by Melanie Ann Layer, who I really love, and she does a lot of like energetics and manifestation. And so I
Mhm.
feel like her work is building really naturally on kind of the energy work and the power of now and the presence work. So I would definitely, she's on Instagram and everywhere. I would recommend her too for anybody interested in energetics. My business partner and I have both been doing a course with her and really loving it.
Okay, awesome. Always love a good Instagram follow.
Yeah,
Okay, and then our last question, because we are the consistency corner and love to talk about all things being consistent, I'd love to know something that you are really consistent with, either in your business or your personal life that you're really proud of.
that's such a good question. I mean, nervous system training, I have logged on to this site every day for a while. And it's funny because I was doing my own nervous system training because I was like, I know a lot of drills and it wasn't feeling fun to just like go in my office and like go through the drills myself. And so it was about a month ago where I was like, I'm going to log on to this site every day, like,
Mhm.
and really be a client, not just an owner of the business. And I'm very proud of that because I'm feeling the difference.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Margie, if people are interested in learning more about brain based wellness, what you do, and how to do these neuro drills, where can they find you? Where can they learn more?
Yes. So for Brainbased, check out brainbased.com and you can actually get a 2-week free trial of the membership. So if you want to give it a try, we have a brand new on demand library and it's so nice. So you can log in and right away just start playing around and trying out classes. The neuro shorties are 15 minutes or less. So those are a really great place to start. And then for podcast guesting, my website is Interview Connections.
Awesome. We will link all that in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for being here. This was such a great conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you too.
Thanks.